Turning now to the war in Ukraine, where earlier this morning a Russian missile struck the city of Kramatorsk within Ukraine's Donetsk region. Ukrainian President Zelensky has posted on social media the strike was launched into the city's center, killing one, injuring three others and damaging lots of buildings. Meanwhile, there's new information that highlights the developing situation on the front line. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine claims Russia lost more than 1,000 troops on Saturday alone. If true, that would make it the deadliest day for Russian forces since the war began. Joining us now, RAND senior policy researcher Dara Masako. Dara, your piece in Foreign Policy discusses what Russia got wrong in the war, and it reads in part, and I quote, Putin's downsized objectives and sudden candor about the campaign's length shows that the Kremlin can adapt to its weakened position and condition its population for a long war. Russia then is either evolving or buying time until it can regenerate its forces. The question is whether its changes will be enough. There are reasons to think the shifts will not salvage the war for Russia, partly because so many things need to change. No single factor explains why the war has gone so poorly for Russia so far. The explanations include problems that are not easy to address because they are intractable parts of the Russian system, such as the self-defeating deceit illustrated by the Kremlin's decision to prioritize secrecy and domestic stability over adequate planning. So, Dara, you've looked at what Russia got wrong during the course of this war. Do you think that it's able to change and rectify its problems?
Thank you for having me this morning. I think that it's able to make tactical adaptations on the battlefield and learn things in that way. For example, using its electronic warfare more capably to jam Ukrainian forces, maybe essentially downsize areas where it occupies. But I think of the larger issues about how it treats its personnel, I don't think they can overcome those losses.
I do wonder, though, Dara, if Vladimir Putin is not looking to history. All the times Russia has been invaded, all the times they've absorbed massive losses, whether it was Napoleon, whether it was Hitler, they absorbed massive losses and they just sacrificed millions of Russians through those two wars and then just ground down their opponents. Do you think Putin's mindset historically is looking backwards at, say, World War II and saying, we're just going to grind them down. We're just going to grind the West down. We're going to wait till Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump or other populists in the West get elected, and then we'll win this war of attrition.
I think there is something to that. I think he's playing the long game and hoping that interest fades over time or the capability to continue supporting Ukraine fades over time. There is a very sad history in Russian campaigns from World War II through Afghanistan, through Chechnya, where the human capital that they have are misused and used as human waves. And that's certainly what's happening right now in eastern Ukraine. They're using different tactics. They call them storm units, but I think we can think of them as human waves, essentially to locate Ukrainian positions and then try to strike them with artillery. So, yes, I think that they are now in that phase.
And let's underline, again, what you've said before. As long as Putin grinds this war out, we're probably not going to see a great change in Russia's ability to move toward Kyiv, to overtake Odessa, because, again, of systemic failures in the system, systemic failures that not only Russia has under Putin, but that the Soviets had as well under their leaders, a top-down approach that didn't work strategically, and it certainly didn't work on the battlefield.
Absolutely. And it's not just the number of losses that Russia has sustained. Casualty estimates at this point are 120,000 plus, depending on who you ask. But it's the troops themselves that were lost in the beginning. So your most advanced equipment, your best trained professional troops. Right now, you're seeing subsequent waves of mobilized forces that receive days to weeks of training. Now, that's also happening on the Ukrainian side as well. So we're seeing a different makeup in both of these militaries with very high intensity, high attritional types of battles. This is taking a toll on both sides.
Hey, Dara, that's where I was hoping you would take us next, is the state of the Ukrainian military. U.S. officials I've spoken to reporting on a story that ran this weekend show They say they're worried how much men and resources the Ukraine has used in this battle for Bakhmut, which has raged on for months now, depleting both sides. But certainly Russia has, though their troops unskilled perhaps, they have more of them. And there is a fear that Ukraine is starting to run low on ammunition, but also manpower, and it could sap their ability to launch this spring offensive we've all been waiting for. What's your assessment as to what they can still do?
Well, it depends on who you're interviewing in Ukraine and where they're actually located. Even within the Bakhmut battle, there are different accounts from Russian commanders and Russian soldiers. Some of them experience a great deal of stress. They're worried about not having enough ammunition, enough mortars, enough artillery shells. Others are saying their position is a little better just based on where they're situated. Bakhmut is a priority for Russia. They want to essentially take it so that they can move forward for the rest of the Donetsk Oblast, which I think is the immediate goal for the Kremlin.
Dara, two factors that you just mentioned: human capital and the waves of assaults. Any army from the time of the birth of this world, any assembly of people fighting want to know that their leaders care to some extent about their lives. But the Russians have proved their philosophy in Ukraine is a typical Russian philosophy: destroy and demonize. They proved that they do not care about the human beings who are wearing their uniform. This is taking place in Ukraine, a country where vast numbers of the Russian soldiers, I assume, are not from Ukraine. They're from Russia or from prisons. So what they lack, it would seem, would be the will to fight that the Ukrainians have, clearly. What kind of a difference does this make, you think, in the long or short run of this war?
I think it really matters. This weekend, there was a funeral in Kyiv for a commander who was killed. And the chief of general staff in Ukraine, General Zaluzhny, went, as well as President Zelensky and some of the other heads of services. And General Zaluzhny went before the family of the fallen and kneeled before them in the funeral. And I thought, yes, it was symbolic in some ways, but I think that is a very important gesture for the Ukrainian people to know that their leadership cares about them and that they are considered defenders. I can't countenance General Gerasimov ever doing the same thing. I've never seen that kind of care or concern from the Russian general staff at this point. And keep in mind, before the war started, from multiple reports now, most of the rank and file were not informed that they were going into Ukraine until the day of. And so that kind of callousness has just undermined their effort from the start.
Dara, Joe talked about the examples of how Russia has just ground opponents down, Napoleon and Hitler. But the counterexample, I think, would be World War I, where Russia sent waves and waves of troops into the meat grinder, and the result was a revolution. Is that, you know, obviously there doesn't seem to be anything like that brewing in Russia now, but do you think the stability in public opinion in Russia can sustain itself?
So right now it's holding, and it's really quite remarkable because the rate of Russian losses outpaces anything that they had in a decade of Afghanistan. In terms of losses per day, losses per month, they were pretty low hundreds. Now they're experiencing that daily. There is some sentiment in Russia that's shifting. People are starting to experience anxiety. There are complaints from multiple regions of Russia, from the families and from the soldiers in Ukraine, about the way that they are being treated. So for now, the Kremlin is keeping a lid on it, but all of those feelings and sentiments are there. I would say the one difference between World War I and the collapse of the line in that war, there was a revolution at home. There's nothing like that going on right now in Russia.